What if everything you thought was built on love was actually built on silence, secrets, and sacrifices that only benefited a few? And what if the truth has been hiding in plain sight this entire time? Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will completely change how you see this story. And if you want more shocking, untold truths like this, hit subscribe right now and join the fastest growing community uncovering what others won't tell you. There are moments in life when everything feels like it is finally coming together. When every sacrifice, every compromise, every silent struggle begins to feel like it might actually mean something. And for Mary Brown, that moment once felt real. It felt close. It felt within reach. But what she did not realize at the time was that she was standing at the edge of a turning point. Not a breakthrough, but a slow unraveling. One that would take years to fully reveal itself. And it all begins under the blazing Las Vegas sun, where the heat presses down, not just on the city, but on the emotions buried deep beneath the surface. Because standing there in the driveway of a home she once called her own, Mary was not just looking at a house. She was looking at years of her life, years of effort, years of belief poured into something she thought would last, something she thought would grow stronger with time. But what if everything you built was quietly shifting beneath your feet? What if the foundation you trusted was never as solid as it seemed? And as she looked at that house, memories flooded in, not just of laughter and family gatherings, but of quiet moments of doubt that she had pushed aside for the sake of unity, for the sake of a bigger vision, a plural family, bound by shared goals, shared love, shared sacrifice. And for a long time, she believed in that vision completely. She gave to it without hesitation, without conditions, because that is what she thought love required. That is what she thought commitment meant. And when the decision was made to leave Las Vegas behind and start fresh in Flagstaff, it felt like another step forward, another chance to build something even stronger. But this is where the story begins to take a different shape. Because while the move was presented as a fresh start, it was also the moment where unseen decisions began to carry lasting consequences. Decisions that would not reveal their impact.
Because she too had been part of this journey. She too had believed in the shared vision, in the idea that what was built together would benefit everyone. And like Mary, she had contributed significantly, trusting that the future they were building would be secure and fair. But this is where the complexity intensifies. Because while both women gave, their contributions came with different forms, different structures, and different consequences. And for Janelle, the decision to sign gift letters at the time seemed like a formality, something required to move the process forward, something that did not change the underlying understanding that the money was meant for the family. But in reality, those documents carried weight, legal weight, that would later define what could and could not be claimed. And this is where the contrast becomes clear. Because while Mary gave without formal documentation, Janelle gave with documents that removed expectation entirely. And as the family dynamic began to fracture, those differences became critical. Because when questions of fairness arose, when discussions about repayment or equity began, the answers were no longer based on memory or intention. They were based on what was written. And what was written did not leave room for interpretation. And this is where the emotional impact deepens. Because it is one thing to feel overlooked. It is another to realize that the system itself does not support your claim. That the structure you trusted does not protect you. And as that realization settles in, it brings with it a sense of helplessness. A sense that no matter how much you gave, no matter how much you believed, the outcome is not something you can change easily. And yet, even in that space, something begins to grow. Something that was not there before. Awareness. Because once you see the imbalance, once you understand the dynamics at play, you begin to approach everything differently. You begin to question. You begin to set boundaries. You begin to consider your own needs in a way you may not have before. And that is where the transformation starts. Not in a dramatic moment, not in a single decision, but in a series of small shifts in thinking, in feeling, in understanding. And as those shifts continue,
As this awareness begins to settle in, it does not arrive with clarity or relief. It arrives with tension, with questions that do not have easy answers, and with a growing sense that something fundamental has shifted and cannot be undone. Because once trust is tested, it never returns in the same form. It either deepens with truth or fractures under silence. And in this case, silence had already stretched for too long. And what makes this stage of the story even more intense is that the changes are not happening in isolation. They are unfolding in real time within a family dynamic that is already under pressure, already navigating emotional distance, shifting loyalties, and unspoken resentment. And this is where the narrative takes on a sharper edge, because what was once hidden beneath the surface begins to emerge. Not all at once, but in fragments, in conversations that feel heavier than they should, in reactions that seem stronger than the moment requires, and in the presence of an outsider who sees what those inside have learned to overlook. And that outsider is not just a background figure. She becomes a catalyst, a voice that introduces a different perspective, one that is not shaped by years of compromise or conditioned acceptance. And when that voice enters the space, it does not blend in. It disrupts, it challenges, it forces a confrontation with truths that have long been avoided. And this is where Jen steps into the picture, not as someone trying to create conflict, but as someone unwilling to ignore what is clearly visible. And her presence alone changes the energy, because she represents something that has been missing: objectivity, clarity, and the courage to speak without fear of disrupting the existing order. And when she begins to speak, when she begins to question, the reactions are immediate, because systems that rely on unspoken agreements often resist external scrutiny. And this resistance is not subtle. It is direct, it is emotional, it is defensive, and it reveals more than it intends to. Because when someone feels threatened by a perspective, it often means that perspective is touching something real. And as tensions rise, the conversations become more intense, more revealing, and more difficult to navigate. Because now it is no longer just about past decisions. It is about accountability, about who acknowledges what happened, and who chooses to stand by their version of events. And this is where the divide becomes undeniable. Because while some seek clarity, others hold on to justification. While some look for resolution, others focus on defense. And in the middle of all this, Mary finds herself as everything continues to unfold, the final layer of the story does not come with a loud revelation, but with a quiet, undeniable shift, the kind that changes how everything is seen moving forward. Because by this point, the illusion is no longer holding together. The roles that once defined the family have dissolved, and what remains are individuals standing in very different realities, shaped by the same past, but interpreted through completely different truths. And this is where the emotional weight becomes the heaviest, not because of what is happening in the present, but because of what it reveals about the past. Because once clarity arrives, it forces a reevaluation of everything that came before. Every sacrifice, every compromise, every moment that was once justified under the idea of unity now carries a different meaning. And for Mary, this is where the transformation becomes complete. Not in the sense that everything is resolved, but in the sense that she no longer sees herself through the same lens. She no longer measures her worth based on how much she gave or how long she endured. She begins to recognize that survival is not the same as fulfillment, and loyalty without reciprocity is not strength, it is imbalance. And this realization does not erase the pain, but it reframes it. It turns it into something that can be understood, processed, and eventually released. And as she steps further into that awareness, the need for validation from the past begins to fade, replaced by...
And now the real question isn't what happened, it's who truly benefited and who was left to pick up the pieces. Because the truth always finds its way to the surface, and this story is far from over. If you want more deep dives and shocking reveals like this, hit subscribe right now. and join thousands of viewers who refuse to miss what comes next.